A sustainable idea for tourism that can be implemented is to provide compost bins at campsites. While it is not uncommon these days to hear of people composting in their own homes and backyards, it is not something that many people see when outside the comfort of their own homes. Camping is becoming increasingly popular in Arizona, and while there are few people who bring their food waste home to compost, why not present the opportunity for tourists to compost at their own campground? According to Go Arizona, an online travel and recreation guide, there are approximately 1,327 registered RV parks and campgrounds throughout the state. If Arizona were to implement a plan to provide composting bins and signs of what can and cannot be composted, it could make a difference on the amount of waste left behind. So, what is composting? Composting is the process in which organic matter is broken down and decomposed of. It is basically nature's recycling system. It recycles these materials which would otherwise be waste products and produces nutrients that can be put in or on soil. The benefits of composting are recycling organic materials and reducing mass food waste. It enriches soil in helping retain moisture and suppress plant diseases and pests, along with replenishing depleted soil. Decomposed organic matter aids plant growth. So when it is ready to be disposed of, rangers can do so right outside the campgrounds. This can also be done in almost any environment. So basically anywhere that there is soil, you're able to utilize composting. This conserves landfill space, and most importantly, it contributes to sustainability by limiting the greenhouse gas emissions that are created when trash is burned. According to Eureka Recycling, although these are natural materials that are biodegradable, when they end up in landfills and decompose without oxygen, they end up producing methane into the atmosphere. Composting is not hard to do as long as it's done right. We can start with placing these at major campsites, and then eventually, if everything goes well, implementing a plan to make it a requirement of all campgrounds in Arizona to compost. National campgrounds can build small structures to hold compost bins and that are towards the center or at the exit of the campground with signs and how to get to those compost stations. There are also campgrounds that already have recycling center structures, so those can be utilized also for adding composting if they're already built. Campgrounds would need to make sure that the composting is done in large, covered bins so that they do not attract wildlife. These specific bins can be purchased online, and an example is here to the right. There would need to be some extra work done by campsite directors, national park rangers, and parks management companies to come by once a week to stir and wet the compost. This depends on how much tourist traffic they are getting at the time, but typically once a week will do. When they see it is full and ready, they will need to have an area outside of the campgrounds to bring the compost to. And lastly, signs will need to be placed of what is okay to compost and what is not. For example, while meat and fish can be composted, it's not recommended because they will attract animals due to their smell. Tourists would be the users of these campgrounds' compost bins, along with the effort of the tourism industry assisting with the removal of the compost once the bins are full. The expected outcome of creating this option for campers and tourists would be to create less waste left behind in the campgrounds. In the long term, the outcome would be to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere overall. People do not want to bring home their leftovers. Many people would jump at the opportunity to leave waste behind after camping if it were in a sustainable way. This will not only encourage composting and recycling, but also introduce more people to composting in general. If we are going to continue to use these campsites, we might as well be contributing back to the area around them and to our environment overall.